Okay, hey everyone, welcome to the next installment of our monthly EAP networking group, virtual networking group. This month we have the awesome Kate Naylor. She is going to be talking about kind of tips and tricks on how to incorporate families and um, uh, anybody else into EAP sessions, how to do that well, how to get people really involved from a systematic approach to equine assisted therapy. Before we have Kate introduce herself further, I'm just going to throw this out there, kind of two announcements. I am working on getting Shannon Knapp out down from Horse Sense of the Carolinas here in the Austin area in Texas to do two different trainings on back-to-back days. The first being their military Horse Sense training. So if you really want to start a veterans program, doing that, and then also her mindfulness, equine assisted mindfulness training for those of us who are facilitators. So getting the training on how to do those sessions, incorporate those services into our businesses. So super cool. Both of those trainings, so the dates that we have right now are, let's see here, September 24th through the 27th. Each training will be 2 days. The cost, we're looking at $695 per person per training. If you want to do both, we'll combine it and give you a little bit of a discount for $1,300. And Shannon was saying to me this morning when I talked with her that this may be her only mindfulness training that she is doing for facilitators this year. So if you guys are interested, shoot me an email, lindsey@conneqtion.com. Connection is spelled ConnEQction. I am really excited about this. It'll be in the Kyle Buda San Marcos area here just south of Austin. And apparently Shannon's had a lot of requests from those of us here in Texas to do that training. So working on getting her down here. So I think that'll be really helpful. So yeah, just let me know if you're interested, kind of gauging interest. We have a minimum and a maximum number of people. So yeah, I think that'll be super exciting. Okay, so now to the real good stuff. Kate, would you like to further introduce yourself to us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Naylor, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in Austin. And I am also a natural lifemanship certified clinician and equine professional, and then a trainer for natural lifemanship. I started off as a teacher, actually, and taught for several years before going back to school and becoming a family therapist. And family therapy has kind of always been my focus because I left teaching so that I could work with parents, basically. I felt like that was what was missing, maybe from my relationship with my students and their ability to improve and be resilient and succeed. And so I left teaching in order to work more with parents and families. And so that's really been my focus all along. I got my graduate degree at St. Edward's in Austin and in an MFT track. And then kind of started working with kids, teens, parents ever since. Then I started in equine therapy in 2012, I guess. And I've worked with horses off and on my whole life. Horses have been a part of my family life forever. So I've been kind of like slowly piecing it all together and combining all my loves. And I feel the more that I work, the more strongly I feel about family work and or including parents in a session when you're going to work with kids. And so it's become a real passion of mine. And then 2 years ago, I had my daughter, and all of a sudden, the value of the parent influence kind of hit me like right between the eyes. And so it's kind of all I think about anymore. So it's my love. It's what I really care about. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Lindsey, for inviting me, and thanks y'all for being here. I have a couple of of things that I was going to like start off with, but I also want to hear y'all's questions too, because if you're here, then you're thinking about this and you want, I'm sure you've got some things on your mind. So Lindsey, what do you think
Yeah.
about that? If I just start off a little bit and then open it up?
Yeah,
That
that sounds
sound
good.
good? Okay, great. So for me, like the beginning of all of this is why, right? The beginning of equine therapy, the beginning of therapy, the beginning of your decisions about who you're going to involve and who you're going to see and in what ways you're going to see them. The why is always your driver. And I think there's theory why that you want to think about, but then also there's logistical why. So we'll talk a little bit about both, I guess. So I guess I'm working off an assumption here. Do most of you guys work with kids? Kinda, sorta?
Y'all
No?
can unmute
Yes?
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
know
would
Hannah
like to, I'd like to
does.
be able to hear you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to be able to hear you guys and just get your feedback as I'm talking. I kind of feel like I'm talking in a cave all by myself. So, do y'all
Yes.
work with kids? Are you interested in family work? What brings you here?
Yes, I work mostly with kids, and I'm interested in like learning more about how to pull the parents in and maybe even siblings and kind of what
Yeah.
that like logistically what that looks like in a session.
Sure. Okay. So hopefully we'll touch on some of that for you. The logistics of it, as you've experienced at all of our NL trainings, the logistics of it is always, it depends, right? So we'll brainstorm on stuff like that for sure. Okay, cool. Anybody else? Are you working with kids, wanting to bring families in? Do you already work with families?
I want to work with kids. I'm just starting out in Australia, so it's very early in the morning here.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in working with kids and adults, but I'm here for that side of it. So if you like.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome from far away.
No, we actually have a really good Australia and New Zealand following already. So I'm super excited about that.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
Yeah. It's okay. I
Good.
think my thing, I think you know that I come from more of a therapeutic horseback riding background
Yeah.
with PATH.
Mm-hmm.
And I have historically worked with kind of your older children, so adolescents. I think I've done really well with. But I think when it comes to parents and families, two of my biggest things to kind of conceptualize would be how to pull in siblings, like Hannah said, because I think there's a lot of times when you have a child who just needs more attention,
Mm-hmm.
how do we make sure that the sibling feels included in the process and doesn't feel ignored? Because I think a lot of times, when they grow up, there's a lot of resentment there. And then second,
Sure.
I don't know if this is something that you've seen or want to touch on, but also helping parents get on the same page with parenting and how to work
Mm-hmm.
on their marriage and their relationship through this process, because the
Mm-hmm.
statistics say that as soon as you have a child with a special need, no matter what that special need is, whether it's taking them to counseling once a week, right, or anything else, the divorce rate goes sky
Goes
high.
up
So yeah,
significantly. Yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
just maybe touching on that a little bit is an area that I'd love to hear about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we
So
have some people that have joined us. So guys, just a quick update. Kate's kind of trying to get an idea of what we're really interested in hearing about, including families and parents and siblings into the session. So if you guys want to take yourself off mute, if there's any kind of burning thing that you want Kate to touch on.
Hey, I'm Michelle Ramsey. Kate, I work at Horse Sense as a therapist.
yeah, hi.
Hi. So I was just Shannon suggested I just kind of phone in and just listen to your feedback and hear what you're doing. I've done the fundamentals and intensive training already, and I
Cool.
don't don't know if you could see, I have three children of my own. I am multitasking.
Very apropos for this one.
Yeah, totally. Well, welcome. Okay, well, so I'm glad you guys spoke up because I hadn't thinking a lot about the so just in
Hey,
and we
Kate.
can talk how.
Kate, you're kind of breaking up a little bit.
Yeah.
You there?
I'm sorry, my
Okay.
phone keeps going in and out.
No, Rochelle, you're fine. I was
See.
talking to Kate.
Internet. We'll see.
Yeah, Kate's been. Technology is always fun in a virtual networking group, right?
Are you losing me?
Every now and then it might help if you turn off your
It's always
video.
this moment. It's like we're just now ready to get started. And,
Or if you're connected to the internet, because if she's connected to
Okay.
internet that's like in that building, it might be better to use her data.
I'm on my laptop, but I could switch to my cell phone if we needed it.
I think we're good for right now. It could help if
I'm
you
breaking
turn
up
off
so
your.
much that I would need to. No. Okay, let's see. Does that help at all? Can y'all hear me any better?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay. Well, let's try that for a minute. I am kind of out in a public place, and so my internet could probably be a little bit tricky. But we'll try this for a minute. And I apologize that y'all have to just stare at each other, but hopefully. Okay. Or asking is already having.
It's still cutting out really bad for me.
Yeah.
For everyone.
Yeah. Kate, if you can hear us, maybe log out and log back in.
On the phone might be a good try to
I'll
on
turn
the
it
phone. Oh, she's gone. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
If anyone wants some entertainment, look at literally where my dog is laying right now.
She's cute.
She crawled on the table while I walked away to get water, and this is what I came back to.
That's what happens. My dogs do the same thing, except mine are big, so they don't fit on the table.
They're so spoiled.
Is everybody excited? It's Friday? Yay! No? Weekend?
So
it's really early for you, isn't it, Allison?
Yeah, it's Saturday, it's still 9 outside. That's why I look like this. This is my early morning look.
You look great. I can't tell.
The Friday was good. That's done. We're on Saturday now.
Well, we appreciate you joining us.
Oh, no.
Here she is. Hold on, Kate. I'm going to mute you. There you are. Hello.
Hi. Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just talk to you on my cell phone then.
Okay.
That's probably good because then I can get up and walk if I need to. Okay. So let me see if I can just get my head on straight. We've had a couple of false starts. Okay. So why working with parents? You guys, the way that you guys have asked questions makes me think that you already kind of understand this idea, but like, so when you think about a kid's session and working with children individually, there's all kinds of things that go into that, right? There's working with them alone and then sending them back into the environment that is potentially part of the issue, right? And so I think we can sometimes feel like we're fighting an uphill battle that way. So we want to think about, when you think about like neurobiologically, the way that children develop, they are developing from their relationships. They are developing from their environment. They're responding all the time. So if you work an hour a week and then send the child back into that same environment, your progress, you can make progress, certainly we do, right? But your progress can be really stunted, especially if you don't have parents on board with what you're doing, or parents who are apathetic to what you're doing. If you've got siblings who don't really know what's going on and don't understand the changes that are trying to be implemented. So to me, it feels like the more family members that you can get involved and get educated on what it is that's happening, and what you're trying to do, you just increase your chances of being successful, because then everybody's in on it. And the more you can empower the family to participate in what's going on, and I think de-identify that child as the patient, and make it a family issue, like this is something that we're struggling with as a family, that all just builds buy-in and motivation, I think. So for me, when I first started out and just had kids and teens just being dropped off at my office, and the parents would go run errands and then come back and pick them up, it just felt like I was trying really hard to build this relationship with a kid, trying to make changes, and then their parent would show up and have no idea what we did, would sometimes try to interrogate me to figure out what the child talked about, right? And try to break confidentiality and all of that, disrupt our relationship. And there were just so many layers of challenges that we were having to overcome. And that piece of like parents wanting to interrogate you and wanting to know what happened in session because they weren't there, but they don't really get it. And how much can you share with them? And how much, the more that you talk to the parent privately outside of the session with the kid, then the more likely the child is to wonder what y'all's relationship is like. There's just a lot of complexity involved in separating everybody out, because I think what we fundamentally, I think in our culture, and I think, when we're trained as individual therapists, I think fundamentally what we forget is that we're all inextricably linked, and we influence each other constantly, whether we like it or not. And so I think if you are a therapist wanting to really have an impact on a child's life, who better to influence than the people that they spend all their time with? It's another reason why I like working with teachers, because that's the other place they spend all their time, right? So for me, the argument to include parents is pretty obvious once you start to work with families and kids, right? Because you start to see how little you can actually do in an hour a week when they go home and everything is the same. Because families create patterns, right? They're built out of patterns, and they work to maintain those patterns. And so if you are not having an impact on those patterns, then your power dissipates, your influence dissipates. From the moment they leave the office, your influence dissipates that whole week. And then you feel like you kind of have to start over again when they show back up again. So to me, there was a point in my practice where I quit agreeing to see children if the parents weren't going to be involved. I have just a no, like, you're not going to get to just come drop off your kids kind of policy. So then the next kind of, yeah, go ahead.
Ask a question about that, just like how, because I think that I've experienced the same thing where so many parents are like, I'm bringing my child to you to fix X, Y, or Z, right? And so like, how does that, can you kind of walk through what that conversation looks like to transition from like, this is the client to we're including the whole family as like a family dynamic.
Yeah, it can be tricky for the families that you've already started working with, for sure, where you already have that pattern developed. But to me, what I have been the most successful with is talking about a parent's power over in a child's life. And I think, okay, so from my perspective, a lot of parents don't want to be involved in the therapy because they don't want to get in trouble, right? They don't want to be looked at. They don't want to be examined. They don't want to be in therapy. So you have to respect that to a degree. You have to be aware that that's probably what's keeping them. And I think the conversation is a lot more effective when it is about it's not that you're the problem, but it is that you are the solution. And just go ahead and telling them, like, there are 168 hours in a week. In 1 hour a week, what am I going to get done? I can do a lot, I can teach a lot, and I can support a lot, and I can develop a relationship with your child. But if you really want to see change, I mean, make it a financial argument. If you want to see rapid change, then you need to be involved, because that's their home with you. So I try to nurture the side of the parent that wants their child to succeed, that wants to see their child well, and just communicate to them that they really have that much power. They can be a force for good in their child's life if they really want to. And by joining you in the sessions, they can learn exactly how to do that and feel built up and feel prepared. I think a lot of parents can feel lost and overwhelmed by what's going on with their kids, right? And so framing it as a way for them to get informed and get some tools and really have something to take home with them to work on during the week, I think all of that can help them feel like, okay, this isn't going to be about me being a bad mom. This isn't going to be about the things I did wrong. This is going to be about what we can do now. Mm-hmm. So kind of that solution focused stance, I think, with them can be a great way to get them started if you've already got them going. And then honestly, a really helpful thing for me was when it just became my policy for new clients. I do not see your kid unless you're coming too, unless we can have check-ins. I'm really starting to think about, like, I almost want parents to commit to like 3 or 4 sessions by themselves before I'll even see the kiddo, just because there's so much work to be done there,
Yeah, I've been feeling that way too, especially with younger kids. Like, I have some
yes.
5-year-olds and 6 and 3-year-olds even. And I'm like, if the parent, like, especially in those cases, the parent is actually the one learning the tools to be able to take into the relationship and develop those within the relationship and the child.
Absolutely. I think the younger the child, the more necessary it is to have the parent involved in as much of the process as possible. I kind of get to a point where it's like, does the kid even need therapy? Maybe the child needs, if there's trauma history or if there's some sensory issues or whatever, maybe the child needs some OT, and then we need some family therapy, or we need some parent coaching or something. It's tough for those of us that like working with kids, but there is this, I had this moment where I was like, in order to help kids, I'm not sure I actually need them to come to my office.
Yeah.
So I think it's up to you how you do that. I do think there's a big difference between parent-child therapy and then like whole family therapy. And so you kind of have to decide, like, who do you want to work with and who do you have the bandwidth for? So, because for me, when I think about like doing a parent-child session, to me, that's more about facilitating a relationship and doing some coaching. But a full family session for me, now this isn't necessarily like the truth about family work, but for me, if I'm gonna have the whole family there, what I'm doing is working on their patterns and the way that they relate to each other. And I'm not I think we can get really bogged down if we try to do family therapy the same way we would do individual therapy, where we're trying to like individually support and individually support and individually support. It's overwhelming. It's too much. I don't think it's where our time is best spent if you're going to have a whole family come in. For me, a whole family coming in, siblings and everybody, the point is to do a much more thorough assessment of what's going on at home, and then start to just shake things up a little bit, bring to light what it is that's happening between people. My family therapy process is a lot more crash bang than my individual therapy process, or like supporting a parent. So everybody's approach is different. You know, everybody's feelings and preferences and skill sets are different. I am a lot more firm and directive in my family therapy than I am with like a parent-child relational session. So the why, okay, so bringing the lens back out again. The why then is when someone comes to you, or you've got somebody in therapy, a child, and you start thinking about bringing in other members, for me, what you really need to be thinking about is, what's the point? What am I trying to accomplish here? What are our therapy goals? And can that be accomplished by just seeing the parents alone? Can that be accomplished? Is that best accomplished by facilitating the parent in the relationship with their child? Or do we need the whole family here so that we can, ultimately the goal for me in family work is to bring to everyone's awareness, like what's going on, like shining a flashlight on what's going on here. Because unwritten rules, old patterns, family secrets, you know, even just the little stuff like roles, like who is the problem child? Who is considered the problem child? Who is considered the good child? Who's considered the overfunctioner? Who is the underfunctioner? All of that stuff, when you bring the whole family together and you kind of step back and watch them interact, you start to see all of that. And to help them see all of that is a huge step in the right direction, because all of a sudden there is an awareness to the pattern so that they can have some more choice about whether or not they perpetuate them. And you can't do that if you're just going to work with the kid.
So I have a question about that. I work with a lot of at-risk youth, and like all the time I want the parents to be incorporated, right? Like
yeah.
Comes to session, I hear things that it would be useful, but it's just not going to happen. Like, how do you address it then?
I think you work with what you can work with, you know. I think in my experience working with at-risk youth, I've had grandmothers come, I've had caregivers come, I've had just one parent come, an older sibling come, whoever. You know, you hear about the resilience in kids who come from major trauma backgrounds is often reliant on just one healthy relationship. The hope is that that's somebody in their daily life that you can help foster that, and you find who you can find, who can come. But, you know, there are instances in which you're going to have people who don't have an adult that is willing to come, and then you shift gears a little bit. Then you might be that relationship, and part of your work may be helping them see the difference between the kind of relationship you have with them. You're trying to foster a healthy relationship, and the relationships that they have with the other people out in the world, and help them start to discern so they can maybe look for that person out in their life, you know? So that's why it's so hard to get into logistics, I think, in a talk like this, because it'll vary so widely and you have to work with what you got. But if you can, you know, like I was telling Hannah, if you can find an adult who is invested, helping them understand the amount of power that they have and the amount of influence that they have over that child can be a great way for them to feel strengthened into participating and into embracing some change. I can't hear you anymore.
Sorry,
There
I'm
you are.
multitasking. I was
It's okay.
working out something between my kids as I'm listening. So,
It's okay. I just wanted to make sure if you were responding that I could hear you.
Thank you.
So yeah, a big piece, like a big piece of this for me is assessment. If you can't get parents to be involved consistently, then at least having the occasional family session can be incredibly valuable just from an assessment standpoint, just so that you get, because like it's so common that a parent will come in and tell you what's going on at home from their perspective, but there's a lot of different versions to their story, right? And you want to know the child's perspective. You want to know the, if there are other adults in the home, you want to hear everybody's perspective, because everybody has their own completely subjective experience of the family. So the more voices you get involved, the more clear I think your picture will become of what's really going on at home, so that you can get more concise, more clear on your goals. Like, what are you actually going to work on? What can you actually have an impact on? So I think bringing in family members from an assessment perspective is huge. And then from an impact perspective, just being able to have a greater impact, I think it's really important. So does anybody have any questions on like that bigger picture of like, why would you do this in the first place? Does anybody have any reservations about that? Or we've talked, Rebecca and I gave a workshop at the last NL conference on involving parents in sessions. And one of the questions that kept coming up was like, when is it not okay to involve parents? And I think there's some discernment that you have to do in some of the trickier cases, but ultimately, like if a parent is involved in a child's life, I'm not sure I would ever say that there's a time in which I wouldn't want the parents involved in the therapy. I know that there's safety things that we want to think about, and you want to do a good evaluation. You want to have some extra support, some good reflecting or supervision or something like that. But if the parent is actively involved in the child's life, then I'm not sure there's a time in which I wouldn't want them to be involved in the therapy. I think it's just, they have too much power. If they're actively involved in the kid's life, they have too much power to be left out. It's kind of my soundbite about not involving parents. But does anybody have any other questions about like why? Because then we can get more into how, if that's of interest.
Yeah, definitely interested in the how and kind of what your role is then in family or parent child.
Yeah. Okay. So then moving into how, I've had the best luck with making it a requirement. So that can vary depending on what you prefer, but at Spirit Reigns, parents had to come for 2 sessions by themselves before their kids were allowed to start therapy. That was just the requirement. And I loved it. And really, if I could have it exactly my way, I'd extend it to probably more like 4 sessions, 3 or 4 sessions. But it just became a requirement. If you want to put your kid in therapy, you have to do this first. And it's really a valuable time to get history that maybe you don't want to take in front of the child. It's a really valuable time to kind of bring the parent in as a team member in the process, helping them feel empowered. And then it's a really good time to educate them on the neurobiology and attachment stuff, so that they have a framework, from which to operate this, and they know what you're going to be teaching your kid and why, with their kid, and why. So usually in those parent sessions, that's when I would teach about the different parts of the brain and bottom up regulation and fight, flight, freeze. I usually teach Dan Siegel's hand model so that they understand, you know, when kids and adults flip their lids and how to get back on track. Because all of that is going to help. If they have a better understanding of that stuff before you start your sessions, then they are much more a part of your team. And going home too, they're much more part of the team in terms of making the shift, because for most parents, it's a shift to focus on connection rather than behavior. So giving them that foundation of knowledge is incredibly helpful. For equine sessions, I also like to get them in with a horse, and so that they start to feel it in their body too. In the past, I have done parent sessions before the kids started therapy, done parent sessions in which we had like a mini kind of horse choosing session where maybe they had 3 horses to choose from. And then we worked a little bit on attachment and detachment, and like asking for some connection from the horses, using their bodies to communicate, and just letting them, it's a couple of things. It's assessment for me. I get to see where some of the parents are getting stuck, where they're struggling a little bit more. I also get to see some of their narrative about themselves, and they also get to experience the body feel of what's hard for them, so that as you start to talk about like using pressure, you know, appropriate use of pressure and things like that, they have a body feel that they can go back to, like, oh yeah, that was really hard for me to increase pressure when I was being ignored, or gosh, when I'm being resisted, that's when I want to just blow my lid, and it's really hard for me to just keep pressure the same. Helping them have a body feel of that, just in the same way that it's helpful in therapy itself, it gives them more to work from. It gives them more to think about. So I really like to do parent sessions where they get some education, we get some time to connect and become kind of teammates. And then they get to experience some of the horse work so that they start to feel it in their bodies. And they also get to some empathy around how hard this is going to be for their kid to do some of this stuff. So all of that feels like a really good starting place. I like doing those parenting sessions beforehand. That's typically when that setup is more for like, if a family they have an identified patient child that they would like to come for therapy, then we would require the parent session first. If we're ultimately going to do family work, then we're always doing family work, unless there's some sort of reason that comes up where we want to split people up for some reason. But the parent sessions alone was usually a precursor to doing parent-child work for a child that was kind of the identified patient. And then requiring them to be a part of the session. They can't drop off and leave. You know, even if they aren't going to be actively involved in the session, they still need to be there. It's really good opportunities for them to work on their co-regulation, their abilities to observe and regulate themselves and notice what's going on for them. You can kind of assign little homeworks for them as they are watching the session, like what are they noticing in their bodies? How are they reacting to certain things? What are they wanting to do? If they're there and you want them to just kind of hang out and depending on their level, you know, their abilities, and depending on your scope, that may be a great way to bring them in. And then just take it a step further, starting to facilitate them in their interactions with their child. So this is where things get a little trickier. I would not recommend doing family sessions without a partner, without a therapist and an EP pair. It's really hard to manage the horse and multiple family members if you're by yourself. A parent and child, maybe just one-on-one, but it gets trickier because you become kind of the holder of the family. And you're wanting to facilitate them in their interactions so that they start to develop some awareness around what they usually do, develop some reflection on whether or not that's actually helping the relationship, and then help them enact something new, kind of coming together on like, what would you like for it to look like? What would you like for this to be? And so you're holding the child's perspective, the parent's perspective, if there's other people involved, you know, multiple parents or siblings, and then what is the horse's role in all this? So it's a lot to hold. So you have to take into consideration your scope, but you can kind of involve parents in any way that you feel like, just depending on your guiding, you know, your guiding light is your goal, your therapeutic goals, and then what's your scope of practice? What are you able to do with your facility, your logistics, your skill set? But ultimately for me, my guiding light is really trying to reconnect the family so that they start to take care of themselves. I think a big issue that comes up when we try to do family work is that we insert ourselves in the middle and we become a mediator. We become kind of a model parent. And I did this when I first started doing family sessions with horses, was I would say, like, I'm going to be modeling what I want you to be doing. And so everything that I'm doing is I'm also teaching, right? And all this stuff. And I think that's important. But I think more important is to actively coach the parents in their interactions with their kids in the moment and not out parent the parent. Does that make sense?
So does that ever cause conflict, or like does the parent ever get, I guess that's a fear of mine that I'm
Sure.
recognizing, that the parent will get upset or will take offense to the coaching? That makes sense?
I mean, yes, it does make sense. I was trying to reflect on whether or not that ever had happened. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly times in which parents disagree with my suggestion. I'm remembering there was a session I did with a dad and a daughter, and he had kind of messed up, and I had encouraged him to find a way to repair. And he really didn't feel, as the father, as the head of the household, he should have to ever apologize. And so we struggled with that a little bit. To me, the hardest thing about that is staying regulated myself.
Yeah.
You know, because that is your job. That's why you're there. And I think it can be really valuable to revisit the science, the neurobiology, the goals, their goals. That's why clearly defined goals at the beginning, at the outset, are really important, because that's a good moment to go back to, well, you told me at the beginning that what you really wanted was for you and your daughter to have a better relationship. And I really believe that, you know, this is a necessary part of that. And so the hardest thing about that is just staying regulated yourself so you don't get flustered. And just remembering what it is why you're there. You know, what's the point of all this? And that can be hard. And I still struggle with that, especially with dads. I still struggle with that. But yeah, there are times when they disagree with it, but usually that comes from their own wounds. Mm-hmm. And so if you have that in the back of your mind, that their pushback, their resistance from you, or their resistance of you, comes from their own fears. And if you can maintain your calm and your pressure, and just support them in moving through it, I've had a lot of success that way. You are going to have parents that are just like, no, I'm not doing that. And then then I think your therapeutic work in that moment is in kind of making that really explicit, so that everybody is aware of what's going on. You know, like, kid is aware, parent is aware, and we're just becoming realistic about what everybody's capable of in that moment. And okay, so that's not something we're going to do today. I'd like you to think about it. I think it's important for the relationship. But if we're not ready to do it today, maybe we'll try again another time. but I think it can be helpful to think about it in terms of like resistance and ignoring, and find, I think a great skill set is just to become creative and playful in the way that you maintain pressure or the way that you increase pressure. Because yeah, you will bump up against that. I mean, maybe one of the best things to acknowledge is, yes, that's going to happen, and you'll be okay. You'll be okay. And it's okay to have to pause and regulate and to gather yourself back up again, and even if that means the next session, you go back and check in on that. And for me, there have been a couple of times in which I've had to do some repair in the next session. But all of that stuff is just really good modeling. It's really good learning. Mm-hmm. So to me, it feels like it's a part of the process. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Kate, what are your thoughts or about if you don't have kids
yourself,
either because you're choosing not to or that's just not something present yet.
Mm-hmm.
With you hit on not out parenting, right?
Yeah.
But
mm-hmm.
having the credibility to do this
Sure.
work when you don't have children yourself.
It's a good question. It's a harder question for me to answer now that I do have my own kids. So I've been doing parenting work all along from when I was like 24, and I got a lot of I had a lot of sessions where parents were like, how old are you? For me, so if you are not a parent, there are some things that you're just not going to understand, and that's okay. You bring in a different perspective. And the thing that I used to say to parents who were concerned was, I am not an expert on your child. You are an expert on your child. I am an expert on childhood development. I'm an expert on trauma. These are the things I know. So between you and me, we're going to figure this out. I do think before I had kids, I was a little on the arrogant side, that I actually really understood what it was like because I worked with kids. So I think there's a lot of value in being humble about that. You're right. I don't have kids. I don't go home at night and have to do this myself. I do this for my work and then I get some breaks. And so it's different for me and you, but that's why, I think you can articulate but that gives me a different perspective. That gives me fresh legs, fresh eyes. And my intention is to be an asset to you. I don't have to know this from the inside out like you do. There are some things that I do know and that I can contribute. And I do think that people, to me now, on the other side of things, the beauty of working with a therapist who doesn't have kids is that their love for their clients, their appreciation for their clients is so pure. It's not wrapped up in personal stuff. And you do get to go home and have a break at night and do something else. And so you do have fresh eyes and fresh legs. And I think if you can pair that perspective, that knowing and confidence with some humbleness around the fact that you aren't going to fully understand what it's like to be a parent, then I think you can connect, and that's really all that is needed. As a parent needs to feel heard and seen. Ultimately.
Thank you. All right. I think we have time for about one more question. Anybody who hasn't asked something you guys want to ask? Amanda, Marlene,
There
Allison.
was so much more that we could cover, so I know that there are some, even if nobody articulates it, I'm sure there's some lingering questions about just what do you actually do in the sessions. And So I can speak to that if we don't
So
get another
I'm
question.
seeing some nods about what do you actually do in the session.
Okay.
So that would be my question. Like, how would you, because I'm gonna have to listen to it. I just had a client no show. So I'm like, I can get the last few minutes.
Hi, Amanda.
Yay!
Amanda's in her PJs. So my question would be, how much information, if you haven't covered this, how much information do you give at the beginning of a session with families about how they're going to go in and work together, or how much of it do you just kind of let it unfold?
Yeah. So I'm pretty big on letting things unfold organically in general. I always want to teach about neurobiology. I always want to teach a little bit about parts of the brain and bottom-up regulation and why we're going to do the things the way that we're going to do them. But in terms of like how they interact with the horses, I rarely give instruction around that. Generally with a family session, there's a lot that happens just in the choosing of a horse. And if you can step back and just tell them, we're going to pick a horse to work with. And so, okay, let me back up even a little bit more. You want to have your goals. You want to have some goals set before you even get started, because you can work in a million different ways, right? You could have the whole family choose one horse. You could have the kids choose a horse and the parents choose a horse. You could have everybody choose their own horse. You could have the kids choose a horse and the parents mostly working outside the pen as supports. So all of that is going to vary depending on who's showing up in the session, what's going on, what are their identified goals. So there's going to be just some creativity and some practice in figuring out what that family needs. And you can always switch it up too. You know, it doesn't have to be set in stone. But I find that if you let the horse choosing process, or if they've already chosen horses, if you let the who's going to work with horses when process unfold organically, you're going to see who generally overfunctions and steps in first, who generally underfunctions and steps back and is like, oh, I don't care. Who is the identified problem? Who is the identified savior? You know, who's the scapegoat? And all of that's really important, because as they work, you're going to want to kind of bring their awareness to that stuff. And so for me, family work and parenting work is more about letting them do their thing so that I can see it, and then helping them recognize it, so that we can, as a family, start to or as a group, you know, family plus me, we can start to discuss, is this working for us? Is this working for you guys? And I feel like I see more genuine, I'm more able to assess and see genuine interactions if I kind of give them some freedom to be who they usually are. But then again, you know, just to clarify even further, I don't usually work with activities or anything like that. So that's not my wheelhouse anyway. So if you are more comfortable in working with activities or having an activity set up, that's fine. You can still see a bunch of that stuff if you set up an activity for them to do. I would just be mindful about the horse's role in all of that, and whether or not they're working on relationship versus like accomplishing a task and stuff like that. But that's a conversation for another day. But logistically, it's a hard question to answer, because I've done sessions where every single member of the family had a horse, and they worked in 4 round pens all side by side. And then I've had sessions in which everybody had a horse and we took turns, and one person would work with their horse for 10 minutes and we'd all support, and then we'd go to the next horse and all support. I've had one horse for the whole family, and they went in together and they decided what they were going to do together. And, you know, so it's all about like, what is it that what is it they need to work on? And how can you kind of creatively come at that? And the truth is, there's, you know, a dozen different ways that you could effectively go after a goal that might not be the same way I would do it, but it's still a good way. So that's what makes answering some of these, or thinking some of these things through, so hard. I'd be happy to, for anybody that's really interested or really feeling stuck, I'd be happy to do a consult specifically and do a case consultation and like really talk about a case. That would be an easier way, I think, to get into specifics about what you would do. But while I'm thinking about it, you know, I've done groundwork. with children as young as 7. So you have to think developmentally. Is it developmentally appropriate for them to do groundwork? I've done mounted work with children as young as 2. And in the mounted work, the parents, I usually have them act as a co-regulating participant, sidewalking or being in the round pen, and their job is to co-regulate and support and engage. And then I would usually facilitate engagement, through mounted work. And then of course there's the question of, like, do the horses even need to be involved in the first place? Is it the land and moving and having the space? Is that enough? So there's a lot of questions that come up that are specific to a family that that you can answer in a lot of different ways to have an ethical and constructive session. But you want to, ultimately, what you want to be thinking about, for me, what I always go back to is, what are the goals? The kids' goals, the parents' goals, my goals. Where do we find the meeting place of those things? And how do we work on better connection? So how do we work on really hearing each other? How do we work on really seeing each other? How do we work on responding? And then playing a little bit with, like, using pressure, increasing pressure and keeping pressure the same, and releasing pressure. So those are usually when I'm in a session and I'm feeling a little bit like, I don't know where to go next. That's usually what I fall back on. What are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish here? What is this family working on? And what's the best way to do that with connection?
I think, Kate, to your point, you and I had a conversation at one point where you said my real client is actually the relationship between people.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really great and unique way to think about doing this work well.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I have said that a lot before and I didn't say that today. I think when you're thinking about siblings, when you're thinking about couples, when you're thinking about a parent-child dyad, when you're thinking about the whole family, what you want to be holding is the whole relationship and what is good for this whole relationship, because I think that'll help keep you from getting into that, what we were talking about before, getting into doing individual therapy with each person, which is, it's not really the point of bringing them all into the session together. We want to talk about what's going on between you. What's the energy between you? Bringing it to light, reflecting on it, and then deciding what we're going to do with it. To me, that's the point of bringing family members into the session together. It's what's happening between you. What's the energy between you, not what's going on. Of course, you're going to check in with, somatics and things like that, like what's happening in your body. And you want to check in with people and you want people to feel seen. But ultimately, what we're working on is what's going on between you.
Awesome. All right. Any last minute burning questions for Kate? No? All right. Kate or Hannah, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just trying to decide if I was going to ask it. You mentioned consultation and I was just thinking this whole time, like mentorship, consultation, like what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Are you available for that? That's more I can contact you individually. I don't know.
I was going to say that's like a really great segue to say, Kate, where can we find you? And what
Sure.
I know you're probably you're not actively doing therapy for clients right now, but what are you available for and where can we find you?
So I am available for consultation through Natural Lifemanship. If you wanted to count towards your certification, that's a great avenue. So you can book me through the Natural Lifemanship website. If you want to just do one-on-one consultation and not have it be a part of your Natural Lifemanship certification, you can just reach out to me specifically. My website, on my website, you can find me. There's the address is kateghostnaylor.com or katenaylor.com. I think both will get you there. I'm happy to do either. If you're interested in Natural Lifemanship certification, I would really recommend you book me through that, though, so it'll count. I also am doing, while I'm not taking on clients right now, I do the Natural Lifemanship personal intensives. And we've got one coming up in March, which is full. But then we've got another one that we're going to open up registration for that'll be in November. And those are really great ways to get to work with me as a client if you want to do that and work on some of these concepts for yourself.
Can't recommend that enough, by the way. Amanda and I did the first one together, and it was amazing.
Good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that it felt that way. I love doing it, and it is powerful stuff. It's I don't know of any other place where you will get so much personal attention while also being in a group, while also having a variety of methods that you get to work through. So I think the personal intensive is a really amazing opportunity. But in terms of case consultation and stuff, just either reach out to me or book me through Natural Life and we can go from there.
Yep. And then also at the personal intensive, Kate led the group through a psychodrama, small psychodrama, but I was looking at the Natural Lifemanship website yesterday, and she's doing a breakout session on psychodrama at the Natural Lifemanship conference. So you can also find her there, and I'm super excited to go do that.
I'm actually presenting all 3 days, I think. Co-presenting with Bettina on a couple of things and then doing a psychodrama workshop. And my psychodrama work is very heavily based in family system stuff. So if family work is interesting to you, the psychodrama workshop will be great for that.
Awesome. Well, Kate, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you guys.
And we look forward to seeing everybody in March. Kelly Smith Jones is going to be talking with us more about the equine professional side of things, and she's taking some really good workshops and classes lately about really the work equine professionals can do and why it's important, and how to really support the therapists that we're working with. So
cool, good topic.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that in March. All right. I hope you guys have a wonderful Friday. Allison, I hope you get some more sleep. And we'll see you guys next month.
Sounds good. Thanks, Lindsay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Kate.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks, Kate.